Hello, it's full screen, Michael, now. Right? Maybe I can. Here. Let me. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to put something else up here. Hold on. Put the Bible in. Work the Bible in. Let's just do it this way. There. Just me being self-conscious, being so big-headed in the screen. All right. Good morning. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Let's see. Where do I want to launch from? I did get through all the notes I wanted to talk about in Bible every morning, but I want to talk a little bit about kind of current events. So yesterday, was it really yesterday that the fourth set of indictments come down? A fourth set of indictments, 19 of Donald Trump and his co-conspirators. It was his legal team. So what happened with this Fanny woman, this attorney, this district attorney in one county in Georgia, right? That's what's happening here. It's one county in Georgia. It's not the Secretary of State, or it's not the Attorney General of the state of Georgia. It's one district attorney in one district in Georgia is interfering in the 2024 election. That's what's happening, right? It's like, what? And it's racketeering. And she expects all 19 of these people to, be in court and judged in all of this, one trial for 19 people. It's like, not going to happen in the next year and a half, not going to happen before the presidential election, not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And the allegations, I'm going to talk about the Bible some here, but I'm just kind of venting right now because, when I try to go and do videos for Sweet Home Maricopa, I look at what's going on. I'm like, the things I want to say about this could be against the law next week. Right? It's like, wait a minute. Like, if I say certain things, I'm like, that could be it. I could be added to this list of 19 that's on trial in Georgia. Right? What? Wait a minute. Because that, some of the people I listen to are like, what's the logical next step for this, indicting attorneys, like lawyers, legal advice, right? You're supposed to get legal advice before you say things, right? And so by indicting the whole team of attorneys, essentially you're making constitutionally protected speech, you're making it illegal, right? Constitutional procedures are, these people are being prosecuted for constitutional, protected behavior. It's insane, the world we live in, and it's a turning point in U.S. history. We are at a turning point in U.S. history. I mean, it's kind of like Trump being elected was the turning point, right? 2016. I maintain that's the crack that can't be repaired, right? The crack in the deep state veneer, right, can't be repaired, and so the crack just spreads, and these are some of those major cracks appearing, right? It's like, the left, radical, activist, Democrat, leftist judges in positions of power are now adding their names to the history books, right? Intentionally. They're like, I'm going to make a name for myself. All the people on my side, are going to hail me as a celebrity. This judge opened up a re-election campaign fundraising website 2 days before posting these indictments, fundraising. She's like, my name is going to be out there. People are going to be cheering me on. I better be able to get ready to take some money, make some money. I tell you what, that's at the front of her mind, not the back of her mind. Right? She has, I can indict Trump. Nobody else is going to indict him for these things that happened in our state. It's just crazy. I'm venting a little bit here, but it's, the Supreme Court's going to step in, right? Whenever it's election interference, 6 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices are paying very close attention. Guaranteed. They're going, it's getting a little out of hand. This is election interference. And as long as Trump's poll numbers go up, these are like campaign ads for him. Right? So it's this strange juxtaposition. When the evil do evil, the good see the good more clearly. Right? It's like, oh, evil does exist. Whew, thank God, that means good exists, right? I have a song with the band that I'm in. It's actually the second song I wrote with this band, but we never perform it. But it's called Darkness. And it's this heavy, dark song. But the last line in it, it's a refrain in the song, but it's the apologetic truth that if there is darkness, then somewhere there must be light. And that's the very last word in the sentence is light, because it's a dark song. You want, when you're playing the song, you want people to feel that. But it's a hopeful song, because when there is deep darkness, there is light, and the darkness, the light exposes the darkness. And so, all right, there, I got some venting out. I'm just nervous as heck about doing videos on Sweet Home Maricopa. Anyway, no, I will. Oh, it's just all right. God is in control, right? That's it's just entertaining to watch what's happening, and it's maddening and enraging and frustrating, but not insanity inducing, right? Because we have the light, because we have the firm foundation of the rock of truth of Jesus Christ, that God is sovereign, and it's impossible for him not to be sovereign. It's not like, well, we think God is in control. It seems like he might be in control. No, it's the most fundamental truth about existence is there is a God, a personal God, who actually has all things within his control, right? And so that question, well, how can these awful things happen? And why does God allow such injustice? Well, because of the design of creation, he created creatures that are kind of like him, right? That have some of his same attributes. We are in his image. And what is that? Well, free will, for one, right? In order for God to create little gods, like little copies, a copy can never be the same as the original, right? It's always a copy. So little miniature reflections, if you will, of himself. Well, one of the most important attributes to fulfill that, being a copy, is to have free will and volition and agency. And so in order for that agency to actually be agency, we must have the option to choose wrong, right? It's right or wrong, and choosing wrong. And even that is within God's design. Those who choose wrong choose so because of God's design, so that the right can be worked out fully throughout all creation. And so when these big events happen that open people's eyes, that's why God allows the wrong, so that people can see there's such a thing as wrong. Because if you recognize there's such a thing as wrong, say you're a godless atheist, borderline agnostic, say you're an atheist, there is no God, and then you see this great injustice, and you say, that's unjust, that's wrong, that's morally wrong. Well, that atheist has to rewind and meditate on why they think something like wrongness exists. How could something be wrong if there is no ultimate morality, if there is no ultimate justice? How can ultimate justice exist without an ultimate justifier, right? So you guys know what I'm talking about. Preaching to the choir here. All right, so what I want to spend the rest of this time talking about is kind of the experience I'm having personally in growing in God, and it involves this, right? The uh, the little world that we've created here on YouTube, This Way Network and Bible Every Morning and Sweet Home Maricopa, and then all the people that have the other like talk shows here on This Way Network, and producer Gina and you guys watching and are commenting, and having my mom in here even, and like this little culture that has sprung to life out of just ideas. Right? Somebody saying, "Hey, let's do this." I'm like, "Yeah, let's do that." And I'll go, "Hey, how about this?" And they'll say, "Yeah, let's do that." And here we are communing together. And as I emphasize over and over again, it is a gift to me personally to come in here and get to hang with my mom like every day. Right? It's like God has provided a mechanism where I can't be in Minnesota. I have to be here, but I can be, mom and I and you all can be together here virtually in spirit. And that's miraculous. And it's happening simultaneously as, my understanding of scripture is growing. And I did a Sunday sermonette this past Sunday called something like uh, The Mission of Christendom to Take Over the World Explained. And I mean, it's revelations continue to come as I spend time in the Word and listening to men of God and learning about Alexander the Great, and his great contribution to world history and culture was that one language would spread through the whole of the world, the whole of the known world under Alexander the Great. The Greek language, the most developed language, if you want to talk deeply about profound things, right? That was the language to speak. And then God picked a guy like the Apostle Paul, who was fluent in Greek and Hebrew to communicate, right? So 350 years prior to the coming of Christ, God is orchestrating that a language, a unifying language spreads, right? 350 years, almost 400 years before Christ and his crucifixion and the most important event in history. God is making sure that there's a unified, mode of communication to get that important message. So it took some time to spread to the whole world, but and then God picking like the Apostle Paul, a murderer. Look, most of your New Testament is written by a murderer, a killer, an evil guy. And here's something that it just didn't cross my mind, but in listening to some of the teachings on Paul, he wasn't just a murderer. He wasn't just like when he oversaw the stoning of the first martyr, right? Stephen in the book of Acts, chapter 8, 9, I can't remember exactly which chapter it's in. But when Stephen, look, put yourself in Stephen's shoes. Stephen was like he was tending to the widows, right? There's that passage where the Hebrews and the Hellenists, right? You have these two types. There's the Greek Jews and then there's the Jews, right? The Greek Jews are the Hellenists, and then the Jews, right? And so these two different groups are getting converted to Christianity, and it's these two different cultures, and they have two different ways of taking care of each other. And like the Jews were doing what the Jews did to take care of their people in need, and the Hellenist Jews were like, we don't know, we don't have a culture, we're just Greek Jews, and we have all these multiple cultures that we're a part of. And the Hellenist converted Jews families or widows were not being taken care of. And so the disciples say, well, we can't stop preaching and spreading the word. So we have to assign this group of people to take care of them. And Stephen was one of them. And Stephen was like a powerful evangelist as well. So he's doing something that many people say, oh, that's the menial work, taking care of the widows, just feeding the widows. Is like, I bet that was the best job ever. Hanging out with these women of God, listening to their stories and feeding them, and them saying, oh, you're such a nice young man. Stephen got his cheek pinched 1,000 times, right? And he enjoyed every second of it. This is a godly man and a powerful preacher. And he's the first one that gets to be stoned to death, right? His glorious death is documented in scripture. What a treasure to be like your death being depicted, getting to see Jesus, right? That's the testimony. Stephen's like, they're hurling rocks at his head, and he's got to take it. And he looks up and he has a vision of Jesus. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if that vision of Jesus was right. Like there's a group of guys throwing rocks at him, like throwing rocks, just enraged. And he looks up and he sees Jesus. And I kind of, this is just a kind of a vision idea that popped into my head as I was thinking about this. You've got this inner circle of people throwing rocks, and then Paul is behind that inner circle. The Apostle Paul, it says he was standing by the coats. These guys take their coats off. I can't throw a rock with this coat on. I got to take this coat off so I can really hurl this rock at him. That's what was happening, right? I got to take my coat off so I can throw this thing with full force. And Paul's standing by the pile of coats, happily sanctioning. He was the authority. He was the boss. He's the one that brought those people there. He's the one that came to town to gather up this rabble that hate the Christians, right? And so Stephen looking up and seeing Jesus, kind of see Jesus is like right next to Paul. Like Stephen's looking up. Stephen knows who Paul is, but Stephen's looking up, and I kind of like, he sees Jesus, and Jesus gives him this peace. Jesus is like, Stephen, you're good. You're good. You're almost here. You're almost here. Come on, Stephen. One more rock right here to the temple, and you're right here next to me. All right, it's coming. And I kind of looking at Stephen, looking at Jesus, and then looking at Paul, and then Jesus going, I got this guy. Right? Jesus putting his arm in Stephen's. This obviously isn't depicted this way, but I kind of like to think, imagine these things. Jesus is like, check it out, Stephen. This guy right here, this guy I'm standing next to, he's going to change the world. Don't worry about it. You're good. And Paul, so not only did he hate Christians and go around killing them, sanctioning their murder, rounding them up, delivering them up to Caesar to be executed. That was Paul's job. He's a murderer, sanctioned by the government. Not only did he do that, but he was like vocally petulant. Like he was full of hatred. I can't remember exactly where the verse is, but like he wasn't just a quiet evil guy. He was full of passion and vitriol toward the Christians. He had to rally the troops like, all right, let's round him up and kill him. That's the guy. That guy is the guy that God got a hold of. Powerful voice, powerful force, a Hebrew of Hebrews, a Pharisee of Pharisees, a guy proud, and he says it. What I considered gain, like proud of his heritage. He's an elite. He's at the top. Nobody can come close to his credentials, and that was what he took pride in. And Jesus just says, perfect. Yeah, perfect. I've shaped you perfectly to this powerful force, and now you're mine. And Paul knew full well what lied in store for him. Once he had that conversion, he's like, oh, yeah, I hurled a few rocks in my time. I'm ready to face that. Paul was the one who dished out the stuff that he was about to endure, right? He was whipped multiple times. He was beaten by rods multiple times. He was stoned multiple times. Paul, he knew exactly what he was in for. And every town he would go into, it would either turn into an amazing church service or a riot. Right? The Apostle Paul, every city has its own culture, and Paul would travel. He'd go to one city and the church would flock to him and like, oh, there's Paul. Yes, come and let's, and the church would flourish and grow. Or he'd go, somebody get rid of this guy. Somebody's spamming in the comment section. So Paul would go into a city and he'd start preaching this gospel, and it would cause a riot, because what he's talking about God, and all these cities have their own gods, and here's this guy. Thank you, producer Gina. I don't even understand what this guy's saying in the comment section. I don't know, maybe he's advertising something crazy. So in getting back to the Sunday sermonette on Sweet Home Maricopa that I did about taking over the world, So the growth that I'm having is understanding scripture more and more, in particular, God's plan in this new creation. We are in the new creation. Jesus's incarnation is the new creation, right? The firstborn from among the dead. Jesus is the beginning of the new covenant, the new creation, the new heavens and the new earth. His incarnation, not his resurrection and ascension. Those were foregone conclusions. Once that egg in Mary's womb, bing, becomes a zygote, that is the new creation, the immortal, the perfect, the pure blood, pure human blood of God, right? The human blood of God. That's the new thing that transformed the world, transformed past tense, that healed, that cleansed, that nasty stain that I can't get out. And now is the miracle, right? The miracle cleaner. Abrasive, Jesus is very abrasive. He's not this nice guy. Oh, he's the gentlest, nicest, and the harshest, cruelest. Right? God is cruel to those who reject him. Right? It's a little mind-boggling, but this notion of the Great Commission is not about preaching and converting. That kind of revelation. Okay, it is about preaching and converting, but that reaching the whole world. The Great Commission is not about reaching the world; it's about transforming the world. And there's the difference between, for example, I used to work as an editor, or no, as an estimator. I'm an editor now. I used to be an estimator, but I wasn't really an estimator. I was an estimator in training. So the day I was hired, I was an estimator in training, and it's a 3-year training. So I'm not full estimator until you're fully trained, right? But you're still called an estimator. And so there's this process you have to go through. And the Great Commission is more about that process of becoming a disciple, right? Becoming a disciple, not just a convert, right? The difference between a convert and a disciple. And that's what we're talking about here. When Jesus said in Matthew 24:14 that this gospel will be preached in the whole world and then the end shall come, right? That was fulfilled by the time the Apostle Paul writes Colossians, right? That was fulfilled because in Colossians chapter 1, verse 23, Paul says the gospel has gone to every creature, has been preached, proclaimed to every creature, right? The fulfillment. That's how we're getting back to Alexander the Great making Greek the language of the whole world, and the Apostle Paul knowing the incredible story of the Old Testament and then being converted to Christ, and then being the one who is fluent in Greek so he can best translate and communicate to all of these non-Jews this incredible story, right? And it went to the whole world. The prophet Joel prophesied that when you see all of these languages being spoken in your midst, all these foreign languages, that's what's in Joel. The prophecy is that when you hear all of these foreign languages being spoken, it's the end, right? It is the fulfillment, right? It is the end. It's the latter days. In the latter days, you will hear all these people. And then in Acts chapter 2, Peter quotes Joel and says, this is the fulfillment of what Joel was talking about that would happen in the latter days. So Peter in Acts chapter 2 was in the latter days of the old covenant, hearing all the people speak the different languages. Joel was fulfilled in Acts chapter 2, because Acts chapter 2, all of those people speaking the different languages are preaching to the people from the rest of the world, right, who had congregated in Israel for the Passover to celebrate. And now they were going back home, taking this message to the whole world. They came from the whole world, congregated. God did a miracle so that they would speak different languages and preach the gospel supernaturally in these languages they didn't know. These other people hear it in their language. They go back and they take it's the spreading of the word to the whole world. And then he used Paul to go on the missionary journeys and the disciples. All right. So the fulfillment of Matthew 24:14 happened. right? This message will be preached in the whole world, and then the end shall come. And the end came. It was the destruction of Jerusalem, what Jesus was talking about. Because the disciples asked him, look at this incredible temple, all these stones. And Jesus says, don't worry, not one stone will remain upon another. Jesus prophesies the end. They asked, and he prophesied. They said, when will these things happen? He says, that's coming. Not one stone will remain on another, and it was fulfilled. All right, the prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD. So then what's this great commission that he also gave, right? He said that in Matthew 24. And then when he resurrects, he doesn't say go and convert. He says, make disciples of all nations. And here's, in my it's a thing about the scriptures that's so rich and deep. I just recently heard this message. And if you listen to my Sunday sermon last Sunday, this is some of this is repeat. But in the Great Commission, there is a word that is used 4 times. I should learn the Greek word, but it translates pretty easily. There is a word that's used 4 times in those 2 verses of the Great Commission, 2 or 3 verses. Matthew 28, verses 19 and 20. All. Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth. That's everything, right? The new heaven and the new earth is the all authority of Jesus Christ. That's the new heaven and new earth. All authority in heaven and earth are given to me. The new creation, the new heaven and new earth. So all authority. Now go. So in other words, we are commissioned in him. We are deputized. We are him. We come with his authority. So all of that authority is ours. So all authority is given. Now go and make disciples, teaching all nations to obey all things, right? Not just to believe in Jesus, but to obey all, to understand, to obey all of the gospel, what that means, the working out of this gospel in culture, not in the individuals, but in culture. That's what the Great Commission is. It's not just the word being preached to all the earth. It's the word taking over all the earth, making disciples of all nations. And the 4th all is, I am with you always. It's him doing it. He is in us doing it. We are fulfilling the Great Commission by converting the nations, right? And even the nations that were once converted, like the United States of America, for example, the seeds are sown and they're distributed and they are fertile seeds and they're sprouting up, right? In times like these, even those nations that are backslidden and apostate all around the world, right? Like France is a Christian nation, England is a Christian nation, Russia is a Christian nation, right? These Christian nations that had Christianity, that have departed from it, that their return, like the prodigal son, will be radical and amazing. And it's happening, right? We have transformation. We have nations converting back to their historic roots, like, well, Russia's doing it. Hungary's doing it. There are African nations that are converting en masse. It's happening right now. China, the Christian church in China is rising as their economy falters and struggles, right? God is in control, and all nations obeying all things is God's will. It's not this Great Commission like, I hope you guys can go out there and do it. It's Jesus saying this is the inevitability over however many generations, right? The Roman Empire converted to Christianity some 3.5 centuries after the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. The Roman Empire, right? Converted. And so it's this long process of nations submitting to Christ and becoming Christian nations. That's what the Great Commission says. I mean, that's like, I didn't know that. I didn't realize until about 10 years ago. That's what it's saying. That it's not an I hope from God. It's this is an inevitability. And if you want to be a part of it, get focused right now. Make disciples of all nations. Lo, I am with you always. All right. That's all I have to say about that. Love you guys. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to get to work here, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Love y'all.